Okay, Matt and Pete, how you both going?
Good, Pato. Great.
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks. Good to see you.
yeah, you too. You too. There was an awesome race and an awesome weekend. I mean, I had the best time, and I'm tipping you both did as well.
Yeah, it was yeah, very, very good. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, you had a good time, Pete.
Backyard Ultras are always a lot of fun to attend. And as we'll get into, it's even more fun when you've got a role in the thing.
Yeah.
And then just to top it off, if your role involves, contributing to the win, that's even sweeter. So it was a fantastic weekend.
Mm. So, how did you guys meet? How did the crewing slash running relationship come about, Pete?
I think the first time I ever had contact with Matt, well, I reckon, Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was probably 2020. You were entered in our 2020 golden ticket backyard race, which was going to be our second event, and we had lads coming over for that. I'm pretty sure Matt was in that because we were emailing back and forth. Obviously, that then got postponed a couple of times. I think the first time we met in person was probably in the 2022 race, which Matt unfortunately wasn't in. I think he had a family event, a wedding or something like that. But he came along anyway and met Laz and met us on the course and sort of soaked it in a little bit. I think that's when we first met. And I think we've been in touch, kind of messaging ever since. But it's kind of built up in the sense of eventually I came to be Matt's crew, but I suppose we'll get into that.
Yeah, so well, we may as well get into that now. Like, how did the crewing part come about, Matt?
Yeah. Like obviously for all my earlier backyards, my wife and sort of other extended family members were my crew. But in the first few backyards, the events were sort of over within, a day and a half or 2 days. And that was all right. At that point. But as the races seemed to start to get longer, yeah, it sort of become a little bit much for my wife, and my 2 or 3 years ago, obviously my kids were a little bit younger then as well, and yeah, we sort of had a conversation, and she sort of let me know in a roundabout way that crewing on her own for entire events was getting harder and harder. And so I said, look, I'll reach out to a few people and see what I can sort of do. And the first real one that I needed help for was actually last GV. But the real breaking point, I guess, was actually Wild Dog last year, where my wife and my eldest son crewed me, and it was really cold, and it was a pretty long event, and there was just sort of something missing in the crew, and I sort of feel that yeah, with my wife, I've said it before in other sort of interviews. When my wife's crewing me and sort of crewing me alone, she allows me to be, obviously because I'm very comfortable with my life partner. I'm very. It allows me to be very vulnerable and, to be honest, show a little bit of weakness, and that's fantastic in every single aspect of life, except maybe ultra running. And so I sort of came to a point where I'm like, look, I need someone to keep me a little bit more accountable to if I'm going to sort of go to the next level. And by this time, Pete and I had a pretty strong relationship through all the Mirror events and things like that. And basically just because we were both really big backyard enthusiasts, like yourself, like we're all very active participants in the backyard community. And so I think just one day I just reached out to Pete and said, look, my wife's coming to Shepparton, but she's really probably only going to be able to crew me for like one day. Are you interested in crewing me for GV Backyard Ultra. And Pete, thankfully, said yes. And the rest is
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned the part about showing weakness. Pete, you're not afraid to like lay down, like give some hard words to Matt if he is showing any weakness.
I think if we go back to like last time's GV, which was the first time I crewed Matt, I think we'd identified between us that the point of vulnerability for him was that he had never gone through 2 nights at that point. And we knew that the second night was the night that really needed that focus and really needed to kind of lock in. And the agreement between us was that was going to be, we were going to fight through that one. I don't know if that was a verbal agreement, but it was definitely an understanding that was going to be what was required. In the end, it wasn't required because the event finished in the middle of the night. But I feel like we had actually conquered that night anyway at that event. I think for coming out of that, we felt like we'd done mission accomplished. My job as the crew, as I see it, is to make him get out to the start line every time. That's probably the most fundamental thing, as long as that's what he wants. So we'll probably talk about what happened at Melbourne at some point, but still haven't quite reconciled that one to be honest. But the purpose of the job and the understanding of the job is that. But there's a lot more to it. So you've got to get to the start line feeling okay as well, and that's where the kind of a bit more of the complexity of the crewing and the strategy comes in. And I guess we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, to me, it was really getting through the second night, and for this one, it was getting through the third night. That was the big goal. We knew we could do 2 nights. We'd kind of done it twice now. And the third night, and a little bit like last year, we didn't actually have to finish at midnight, but I feel like we were totally locked in for the third night. Both of us knew that Matt was 5 or 6 hours till light. I think he was totally locked in. We were going to make it through that night. So I feel like we've conquered that now. So next time it's the 4th night.
Yeah. So Matt, do you think you would have run at GV if the silver ticket wasn't up for grabs this year?
Yeah, really good question, Pato. And look, the short answer is probably not. Very early this year, and essentially it started at the end of last year's SAT Champs, where all of a sudden, all the whispers sort of start about where's the next, where are the next silver tickets coming from? And obviously having a close relationship with Pete, it became, I sort of got the early word that Miram Werner, the original silver ticket event, that is Pete's baby, may not be putting in an application for the silver ticket. And that sort of opened up a whole sort of world of opportunity of, okay, where's the Victorian silver ticket going to be? And, you don't have to, look too far to see the growth of GV. And I thought that, GV would be a very strong candidate if it put in a bid. And if that was the case, then I would definitely do GV. So the silver ticket was definitely the carrot that got me there again. I've loved GV every single year, as you have, Pato. It's a real, I've got a real emotional connection to it. I grew up not far from Shepparton, and I've formed a lot of close relationships through that event. So I've got a real, intrinsic connection to the event, and the fact that it became a silver ticket event really locked it in for me. So this whole year was sort of about targeting GV.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, let's just talk about your Backyard Ultra achievements, because they're pretty impressive. Like, you were part of breaking 40 for the first time in Victoria at MVP with Ben Nichols. And I'm not including the SAT Champs in this either, but you were the first to break 50 in Victoria at Melbourne, again with Ben Nichols. And now you're the first and only to break 60 in Victoria.
Yeah, look, when you say that, it's pretty special. But there was, you and I have spoken about this at length But for the listeners at home, like I was sort of lost in the abyss for a couple of years, to be honest. Like from 2022 when I ran that good 40, at that stage in 2022, that was considered a pretty high mark. But in the next 12 months or 18 months, a whole lot of people leapfrogged me, to be honest. And I became just sort of like an average backyard runner. And I knew I was going to have to change something if I wanted to get back to sort of the top end of the format. And Pete coming on as my crewman is no small part of that. And so, yeah, between that MVP event in 2022 and I guess Melbourne, I didn't do, I got a lot of wins at GV, obviously, but then I was sort of always stuck in the 30s and 40s. A real disappointing event for me was Wild Dog, when I was in a really good winning position and I mentally just let that slip. And that was, as I just said, that was really the sticking point of me having to change something. And it wasn't until this year, and to be honest, last GV is when it began, when Pete came on board as the crew. That was the start of my new sort of my new wind in the backyard format, showing a good level of improvement, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I forget if we've mentioned it or not, but this GV was your fourth win in a row at GV. And that performance was also the highest silver ticket, last one standing performance in Australia too. So everyone in Backyard Ultraland knows who Dubes is.
Well, thank you. And I think you play a huge part in that as well. Our friendship that's grown through this format and this community. You're obviously the face and the voice of Backyard Ultra in this country, and to have an ally in you, it's not lost on me, mate.
So of all these achievements, is there one that you're particularly proud of?
Look, the MVP one in 2022 is still very special to me. I met Ben Nichols, obviously, who's, our journey in backyard running is sort of we've been on a journey together. And also it was the first time I realized I could be a decent runner in the backyard format. But this one in particular, winning the silver ticket, is very, very special. So this most recent race from a few days back, is definitely the high point of my running so far. I thought the whole time that, especially after the last silver ticket event at Mirror, when I was completely out of my depth and completely outclassed, let's be honest, I thought that maybe a silver ticket was beyond me. I made a lot of changes, and here we are today.
Yeah. Pete, you brought up Melbourne before and the way it finished. And I was wondering, like, the bigs at large list ended up going down to 64 yards. And I was wondering that, like, if you were running at Melbourne and you knew that you only needed another 7 yards and it would possibly get you to bigs this year, do you think you would have kept on going?
Look, I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't know, to be honest. Honestly, I don't know if I was in a position to go to bigs anyway. That would have obviously had to count me out of the silver ticket event at GV. And to be honest, that was a huge carrot for the entire year. And at the time, qualifying for bigs wasn't a realistic sort of thought in my mind. So yeah, it's a hard question. Like, I don't know. Like, I spent the entire year thinking of the silver ticket event at GV. And I don't know if it's a reality that I would have made it to America anyway, even if I had qualified. So I'm not sure if that would have been enough of an enticement to keep going, to be honest.
I reckon that the clincher at Melbourne that made Matt stop at Melbourne because he did have a bit more, was knowing that there was the silver ticket ahead, and that was his plan. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned bigs that night, although at the time we thought it was probably more like 80 that was required, and there wasn't much interest in going after bigs, if I remember. Although obviously he was like 50 hours into the run as well when we started talking about it, or when I started talking about it.
So it sounds like you were leading into GV, you were thinking more about the achievement of getting that silver ticket rather than winning 4 in a row. Would that be right? Is that what was driving you more?
Yeah, I think you're right, Pato. Like last year was the event where I was going for 3 in a row, and that was enough to sort of secure a lifelong sort of memory and achievement at GV. And so this 4th one wasn't necessarily about winning GV for a 4th time. Coming up against a much stronger field this time around and potentially winning a silver ticket. Yeah, that was definitely what drove me more than winning 4 in a row.
Yeah. And is it something that was helping you, like, were you thinking about that silver ticket during the race as well? Was that driving you through the race?
Look, it's funny, like that's all we're talking about now, and that's all I was talking about beforehand.
Yeah.
Give it a moment's thought during the race, because when you're racing, it's all about the people around you. So I was always, talking to and thinking about my competitors, to be honest. Because, yeah, deep down, obviously, to win the event, you sort of, you have to get through every single competitor. And knowing just how strong the field was, the silver ticket was the furthest thing on my mind. It was purely just how many people are left in this race, how many laps have we done, and of the big contenders, of the realistic chances, who's left in the race. That was sort of the thing that was going through my mind.
Yeah. So before we go into the race too much, I just wanted to touch on how much Victorian backyard ultras have improved in the last couple of years. And Pete, you've been a backyard ultra connoisseur since day dot, so you would have seen how much they've improved.
Yeah, the only one I haven't witnessed is I didn't go to Truth Drive. I haven't been to Wild Dog. I haven't quite got it in me to go up there in the winter, I don't think. But yeah, the scene has definitely evolved now in Victoria. We've got probably, you correct me if I'm wrong, we've probably got more than any other state now.
But yeah, we've got heaps. Yeah, I mean, we've got a solid group of hard nuts you can count on doing 30 plus, and a whole heap of up and comers in every race who are stepping up.
I think we should credit Robbie as well, because he's sort of taken it out on the road with his Trier backyard series, and put it in the regions. And there's people showing up and doing these events and doing quite well at them that probably wouldn't even know about this stuff if he wasn't. He's kind of showcasing the format in Victoria. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a really good way for people to give the format a try. But I mean, to me, Luke Slater is one of the most improved backyard ultra runners in Australia for sure. Remember, you mentioned you were enjoying watching him run, Pete?
So I don't remember mentioning that. I'm looking at your face. What he reminded me of was reminded me a bit of Dan Kamak at the Sat Champs, if I'm thinking the right person. Yeah. So the guy and this is approaching a backyard exactly as you should. He was not giving up. He had a mission on his mind, and he moved his chair to the finish line, so he didn't have to go to his gazebo. So Dan did this for about 12, maybe even longer hours, into the 70s at the Sat Champs. Got in, stayed at the start line, got nursed or attended to whatever he needed, and got up and went out again. It was pretty bloody impressive to do that, I reckon, for such a long time. Not sure how many hours Luke did it for. It was probably like 5 or 6, I think.
Yeah. And that 52 he ran, like that's almost 2 years ago. That was almost enough to get you to bigs.
Yeah, it would have been. Maybe 3 years ago,
yeah. Hey, so Matt, how did you approach the training going into GV compared to Melbourne? I know you did like almost a 200 kilometre week leading into Melbourne. and I think you maybe peaked at about 180 into GV.
Yeah, look, to be honest, it was quite similar. I didn't actively do too much different other than obviously being very, very familiar with the GV course. I know that it's a hard surface course. So I did a whole lot of running on, my local streets and particularly my rail trail. So I basically didn't do any sort of trail running whatsoever, and hill running whatsoever. Like where I live in South Gippsland, it's very, very hilly. And so if you want to avoid the hills, you have to essentially go to the rail trail. And so a huge, huge chunk of my training was running out my door, running on the road, getting to the rail trail, and then just running for hours on the rail trail and running home. Because I knew that that's what GV was going to feel like. So I really focused on sort of hard surface running, and flat running, to be honest, not much elevation at all. That's the only thing that I really changed from Melbourne, whereas Melbourne I did a little bit more, elevation type work. I don't know if it was better or worse. I've got no idea, but being so familiar with GV, I knew exactly what it sort of took. There.
And like, how much do you like actually enjoy your training? Like, do you always love it, or is it sometimes a grind to get out there and do what needs to be done?
No, I'm very fortunate. First and foremost, before I'm a backyard runner or an ultra runner, I'm just a runner, and I've always said it. I love running. To be honest, I probably love running more than racing.
Yeah.
If I wasn't racing backyard ultras or participating in these events, I'd still be a running enthusiast. I get just as much fun running at my local park run with 30 participants than I do at a sort of a backyard ultra. So yeah, training for me is quite easy. It's just about finding the time, having a job and a family, balancing, all of that together. That's the challenge. Once I'm actually got my sneakers on and out the door, that's the easy part. It's finding, 15 hours a week, every single week to run. That's the challenging part for me. Obviously accepting the compromises you have to make, and obviously creating a little bit of extra stress for your family around you when you got to go out the door so often. But once I'm actually on the road, the easy part starts. Running's the easy part for me.
Yeah. So we mentioned how strong the field was. So going into the race, like, who were the runners that you were expecting to stick around the longest? No?
Yeah, well, look, the names at the top of the list are the easy ones. Like, obviously, Barry Keane was very unfortunate to sustain an injury early on. Like, he's had a fantastic year, and he had my measure at Wild Dog last year, and he had a great couple of results this year. So I fully expected him to be very serious. He wouldn't have travelled down to Shep if he wasn't serious. Did a lot of racing this year, so that might have played a little bit in my favour. And it was very unfortunate that he got an injury early on, and I've got no doubt that he'll be bigger and better next year. But he was obviously definitely a contender. Very much, Ross McLean. He's a super runner. Flat courses, his playground as well. He comes from, a track running ultra sort of background, and he's got massive results in the past. So he was definitely one to watch. The fact that he's such a good guy and a good friend of mine doesn't help the situation. But I was definitely, threatened by Ross, to be honest. And obviously Joel, great guy who was the assist. He's got a couple of really good results. He had a couple of lingering injuries sort of in the recent past, but I fully expected him to be cherry ripe for this event. And in the end, he had a fantastic race. And then the couple that I'm sort of less familiar with, Scott Cameron, I wasn't too sure about because I didn't know a whole lot about Scott Cameron. I just knew he was coming with UCO from South Australia. But I knew that he was going to be sticking around for a while. And to be honest, looking at him and following him on the road, he was outstanding. I was actually surprised when he pulled in because he was running very, very well right up until when he pulled out. Obviously, everyone's favourite backyard runner, the Crow. He's shown so much improvement and development in this format over the last year and a half. Every single race he seems to get better at. So this easily could have been a race where he just explodes and absolutely puts me to the sword. And I fully expected that, so I had to be prepared for it. Those guys were the main contenders, obviously. And the big surprise packet was obviously, like you just said, Luke Slater. I knew he was a good runner. I've raced against him a couple of times. But to see him do what he did on that third day and just while everyone else around him was sort of crumbling, he just stuck around, got in the last minute, got all that fantastic aid, and then just get back up out of that chair. As Pete said, that's what the format's about. He got every single last ounce of performance out of himself.
Yeah, for sure. And were you kind of thinking the same kind of along the same lines, Pete?
In terms of the competition?
Yeah.
I didn't realize until watching your video a couple of days ago that Joel's actual name was Rock and Roll Joel Von Sexton. If I'd known that, I'd have been even more intimidated going on. He was like top of mind for me because he's such a cool character in the way he runs. And obviously all the other names that Matt talked about, a couple of them I didn't know. I didn't know Luke Slater. I didn't know Scott. But yeah, we all knew who to watch for. But I had a sense, because I know that Joel was in the SAT team last time, that he mentally probably wanted it as much as Matt, or at least as much as Matt. And there was going to be a psychological element to the sort of battle of attrition at the back end. And I saw him as being a major competitor on that front.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, with that field, Matt, I'm sure you were confident that you'd be in the race for a very long time. But what was your confidence level like about actually finishing as the last one standing?
My confidence got up. It grew as the race went on. I've got to be honest, I had a few dark points on the second night. The second night was harder for me than the actual third night. Right. And let's be honest, when Barry got injured early on and was out of the race, and Ross McLean told me that he wasn't feeling that great, I think in the early 30s or on the second day, that's when the sort of the window sort of opened up, and I thought, oh, hang on here, this is starting to get to the business end now. If I keep going and keep following what I'm doing, I could be up to my neck in this in a day's time or so, and as it turned out, it was. But as particularly on that third day when it whittled down to 3 and 4 of us in particular, because I think 4 of us ran together for a fair while without anyone dropping. That's really when the race sort of started to progress, and we just sort of ticked the laps off one by one. And by that third night, I was feeling surprisingly good. So I went into that third night pretty confident, to be honest.
So I
think you went into the third night in almost the same state as into the second night. It's like we had that whole 24 hours hadn't had that much impact. The lap times were the same. Your mentality was the same. Our plan was basically executing flawlessly, which made it easy for me because we just had to do the same thing every hour. and nothing seemed to be going wrong. There were a couple of little things. There was a little calf thing. There was also a couple of times when you indicated that you weren't feeling that great. But really, it just went clockwork for the most part, for 99% of it.
So I remember before the race, Pete, like you looked at me and you said to me, this is going to be a classic. And you definitely weren't wrong. It was a classic race.
Well, it had all the ingredients, right? So
Yeah.
it was it had the silver ticket. It had the athletes that attracts.
Yeah.
And each one of those sort of major athletes, and yourself included, has a story that plays out at the event. And the story, it has some success. And for one person, it has the ultimate success, but everyone gets their own. But you could interview each of those sort of 5 or 6 runners that we've talked about and get an interesting story out of them, I reckon.
Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely was an absolute classic. And it wasn't just because of the high result, but also how many runners were pushing themselves to their limits all the way from the start of the race till the very end. And like one thing like I realized at GV was how important all the runners are from the very start of the race. And I was so inspired, like seeing runners busting their guts really pretty much from the start of the race. So Matt, do you get inspiration watching those runners early in the race, pushing themselves to find their limits and working so hard to achieve their goals?
Oh, definitely. It's one of the beautiful things and pure things about the format is that, and everyone touches on it. We people in the community, we all agree that like a truly beautiful thing about the format is that every single competitor has an opportunity to do something special. You just have to try and really dig in. And then at the end of the race, you've surprised yourself, and I that's one of the reasons why I love the format is that it doesn't matter who you are, you can run next to someone that you don't even know and they can tell you their story and, you can form a close bond and relationship with them in a single lap, and something sticks with you, guys that I've ran it with GV over the years. And I don't have a strong personal relationship with them, but I just know when I see them at GV, a whole year has passed and it's like a family reunion. And then they tell me what they've been doing for the year, what racing have they done, and basically, how they're going. And then, we follow each other's race and then it's done and dusted for another year. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think it's important that these runners, and they probably don't know how much of an impact that they have on the runners who do stick around till the very end. I think it's important that they actually realize how important they are to the race as a whole and how much they're inspiring everyone in the everyone in the race.
Yeah.
I think that there's a huge positivity in, I think a lot of runners doing it for the first time surprise themselves in how far they get, whether it's 8 hours, 10 hours, 15, 100 Ks. And it's probably one of the easiest ways in an ultra to get to 24 hours because it kind of regulates your pace and everything. There's an argument to be had for that. So there's a huge number of people that got to 24 hours. And each one of those positive stories of someone breaking through and getting their PB just adds a bit of a positive vibe to the event. It all rolls up into the positivity of the event. And Robbie's very much through his modus operandus is to have as many people as possible breaking their PBs, and he celebrates those he celebrates every single one of them as they finish the race. In fact, I probably played a little bit counter to that because I wasn't officially crewing until day 2, so I was kind of hanging around at the finish line and at the RD tent for quite a lot of time on the first day and on the evening, and quite a few runners who were pulling out were coming over to say that they were out, and for whatever reason thought that I was an official at the event instead of coming and telling me that they were finishing. And I was basically saying, no, you can't finish now. There's still 12 minutes before the next yard. You've got to go out again. And I don't know if that's exactly the messaging that Robbie wanted for runners that were pulling out, but I found it quite funny. I also think it's a fair point to make people push them out for one more.
Yeah, for sure.
Didn't work though. None of them went out for
Oh,
one.
really? um, so Matt, you did mention Mirren before, and it was a race it definitely didn't go to plan. But looking back now, do you think that race experience helped get you where you are now?
Definitely. So yeah, it was definitely an event that showed sort of what I had to sort of learn and grow in the event. I had to obviously work on my hydration and an electrolyte sort of plan better. Um, and it sort of showed me that if I wanted to be competitive going forward, while all these fantastic runners around me were continuing to improve and grow, at that point I'd sort of hit a bit of a plateau in my backyard racing. Yeah, Mirren definitely opened my eyes that I had to sort of conduct myself and train and prepare a little bit differently if I wanted to improve sort of at the same rate as, my peers around me. So yeah, Mirren it did play an important part. It was an unmitigated disaster. Let's be honest. I only completed six loops before I had complete sort of body failure. Because I was just completely underprepared and out of bar.
You weren't the only one though. There was another factor on that day, and that it was a steering hot day that no one was prepared for. How many did you do, Patter?
3. I did 3.
And Ben Nichols, 4, I think.
Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah. Yeah, that day was off its head.
But what that event also did show was that at the very top end, if you are prepared,
it can be done. Oh.
You can still have fantastic performances. And so Tim and Dan and the people that finished at the very end of that race, they were in the same conditions as us and as me, and they somehow made it work. And so there's still no excuse, there's still the value in being super prepared. And that's what I learned from Mirren.
Yeah. So what about Melbourne? Like, how much did Melbourne help you, that performance, when you started getting to the pointy end of GB?
Yeah, Melbourne was fantastic. I don't think without Melbourne and without Ben Nichols and the Crow at Melbourne, that race, I don't think this result at GB happens. Before Melbourne, as I said before, I was stuck in the 40s, sort of, happy to win GB. But in terms of big numbers and running, it 3 nights, at that point, it was still beyond me. It was still remained to be seen. And Melbourne had really good conditions for running. The weather was really nice. And there was a good core bunch of runners that would go the distance. And it was just a perfect low stakes environment to just sort of stretch out and test myself. So obviously at Melbourne, I showed sort of huge improvement, not only in the running part, but obviously at the aid station as well. And I think what Pete and I did at Melbourne really laid a really strong foundation and for what we'd execute at GV this time around. But there's no getting around the fact that the results and the confidence I took from Melbourne got me through GV. Absolutely.
Melbourne got us our system for basically the system that we followed yard after 60 yards on the weekend. That helped us prove that you got through the second night with no problems at all. So we knew that was behind us, and B, we had a rhythm of. I got to know how Matt operates as a runner, and it's a very repeatable pattern. The aid station and the changeover, it varies a little bit kind of through the night and through the day with some specific things, but it's a very repeatable pattern that we can just do over and over and over again. And I feel like that's what we've really cracked this week. Melbourne and this week has really solidified that, such that if we do this at the Sat Champs, I think we've got an incredible base to build on. It'd be interesting to talk about what in the future, what sort of few things we might tweak. But I feel like we've got that. Melbourne, we nailed the system, and this weekend proved that we nailed it.
Yeah. So I've noticed, Matt, that you, when you finish each yard, you go to the communal aid station and get an orange wedge.
Yeah, what started out through necessity, actually, all the way back at MVP in 2022.
Yeah.
That was the first time, because it's MVP is such a hot, it's a summer event. So having a nice cold orange wedge was a really great way to finish every single loop. It started all the way back then, but now it's sort of just become a tradition, or I just sort of have to do it for good luck. So most loops I just go straight to, doesn't matter what race, go straight to the communal aid station, just grab a single orange wedge and head back to my tent. And look, I don't have to do it. I've got oranges in my own tent. I come prepared just in case there's no oranges at the communal station, but it's just become a habit now. And because I've had some pretty good success in the last year and a half, I'm reluctant to change that.
Yeah. It's good. I love it. So you mentioned that, I think it was after the race, you told me that the surface felt a bit harder than previous years.
Yeah. Obviously, I sort of compare every race to the previous one, and I was expecting GV to just feel normal, but it sort of, I got sore muscles in my legs much earlier than I did at Melbourne. Melbourne's obviously a much softer surface because there's it's light trails and not as much asphalt. So I definitely felt the hard surface earlier on at GV, and don't get me wrong, sore legs isn't what knocks you out of a race like this. But I definitely felt it early on in this race. Probably, and you're right, probably earlier than I did at the previous GVs beforehand. I don't know what that was. I don't know why. Maybe I was just expecting it to feel like the Melbourne course. But it was definitely firm underground, as it would be, obviously, because it's 99% asphalt. But yeah, I felt it in my legs earlier than I thought I should have. Yeah.
So about what stage of the race did you start having to work hard to complete each yard?
Oh, look, I was still sort of running on top of the ground, from for the first, 36 hours or something. I didn't really start to sort of shuffle a little bit until after well into the second and third day. But look, I started to get muscle soreness from, yard 10. Look, I guess all of us do, it's still 70, 80 kilometers that we've ran on a hard surface. It's just really about dealing with it, accepting it, and sort of moving on, knowing that, a little bit of soreness is not what ends your race here. It's just something to accept, take note, and move on. But yeah, look, I could definitely feel my legs were a little bit heavier from the 10th yard onwards. Thing is, and I know this from experience, that once you start getting that soreness, you might not get, you might have a discomfort level of 2 out of 10, but you might not get to 3 out of 10 for another 24 hours. So that's just sort of experience. So you don't need to stress, and you don't need to be anxious or feel like your race is coming to an end. I know that once you get sore, you don't necessarily get more sore for a little while.
Yeah. And was there anything you were hyper focused on as far as your strategy went that you really wanted to make sure that you got it right?
Yeah. Day running seems to come quite easy to me, and that's why my laps sort of show that. I was coming in comfortably in 44 minutes, 45 minutes during the day, and that felt really, really comfortable. But at night, I don't know if it's because I've got a poor quality headlamp or just I just naturally slowed down at night. But working sort of at the same intensity, I'm always coming in around 48 minutes. So I'm always losing 4 minutes at night, which means I've got 4 minutes less in the aid station. So getting the most value out of those 12 minutes, that was the most important thing, particularly the second and third nights, that they were the key time frames for me in this race. Because I thought that, look, most people will get knocked out in the second night because only the really stronger runners will survive for the third day. And then the third night, I was pretty confident the third night would sort of sort out the result of the race, because looking at all the competitors in the race, that surviving the third night was still that limiting factor for all of us. None of us had survived 3 complete nights before. So I still had it in my mind that if you could run till dawn on the Tuesday, you're a pretty good chance to win this thing. And as it turned out, I was right. So the second night and third night, they were the 2 most important time frames of this race for me. So getting the aid station and that transition perfect, or as close to perfect as possible, that was the key. And that just meant as soon as your lap was over, forget food, forget water, go straight to the bed. That's another thing that I changed up. This was the first year that I actually had a bed and not just a layback chair. To be honest, that probably did wonders. We can talk about that in a minute, but because I'm getting off track a little bit. So when I'd finish a loop at night time, I'd forget all the food and water that I would normally take on board. I go straight to lay down, get as much rest and as sleep as I can. And with no more than 4 minutes to go, the alarm clock would go off, or Pete would come in. And then that 4 minutes would be a scramble to get out there. And that would include everything to, redoing my shoes, food, water, a little bit of communication between Pete and I, a little bit of motivational talk, and then making sure I've got all my gear, and then heading out nice and early to the start line.
Yeah. So does that mean that you were like consuming a lot of calories while you were out on the loop?
Yeah, look, I always take tailwind. So tailwinds are non-negotiable. So it's a diluted sort of tailwind, but it's base calories nonetheless. So every single loop I have tailwind with me. And then as I'm walking out of the gazebo, I've normally at least got like a handful of chips or a chocolate bar. So I'm literally eating that as I'm walking to the start line. So whatever I sort of eat in the tent is a bonus as well.
Yeah.
But having said that, there was solid food on pretty much on every yard, especially later on in the race. So we were doing that system of, so the way I worked at each hour was 2 logistical things: was get the water bottle off Matt and get it filled so that we didn't stuff that up and not have it on the next lap, and then get him lying down as quickly as possible, and then prepare for whatever he was going to have when he woke up. So 3.5 minutes before, I'd wake him up and have the food ready. And he was pretty good at getting some noodles down, getting the headlight back on. There was a pattern of drinking some Coke, particularly at nights, and some chips, and maybe something else on the line. So there was actually quite a lot of food being consumed between every lap. In my mind, there was definitely no deficit in fueling going on. That wasn't going to be the thing that got us. Maybe even, so Matt obviously has a stomach of steel, because I don't know if a lot of people can manage that quantity of food and nutrition during a race. But we've never had an issue with that.
And as far as that mattress or the bed goes, was whose idea was that? Was that your idea, Pete?
It wasn't my idea, but what was my idea was focusing on sleep now is the key to getting through night 3, and focusing on that right from the start, right from the first evening, trying to get some sleep all of the time, because I felt that it's an accumulative fatigue that's going to eventually get you. And the way to delay that is by starting to rest early in the event. I didn't know that the bed was coming, but it was a winner right from the first night, because I think he was actually getting to sleep, which isn't normally it's just meditation for the first couple of nights, but there was some sleep being had, which was gold. And there's a couple of reasons, there's quite a few reasons why that is really important. One is it sets you up for the following night. Two is the psychological sense of, I'm getting some sleep, the plan is working. Three, you're getting some sleep every hour, you're more lucid, your thinking is more clear. And four, I think this is really important on the third night, is your competitors eventually going to know that that's happening. If they're not getting that sleep and they can see you coming out fresh every time, that's going to start hurting them. And Matt coming out looking fresh at the start of every yard and then taking off at the start of every yard, that must have taken a toll on the opposition. In my mind, it's going to eventually take a toll on the opposition.
And yeah, how did you make that decision to have a bed, Matt?
I got off the bed discussion, didn't I?
Well, absolute luck. I would say no more than 4 days out from the event. My mum just sent me a message. Look, my folks aren't getting any younger, so they're starting to sort of declutter their house, the family home. And she just said, look, we've got a stretcher bed from our camping days. Who wants it? And I just thought about it for 1 second and said, hey, that could be exactly what I need for this race. So I went to the family home and picked it up the day before the race. And that's it. And it was a game changer.
Yeah.
And unless my mum sent me that message a few days before the race, I would not have had it. And it would have been, I'm sure we would have been fine in that, those layback chairs are still pretty good, let's be honest. But they are not the same as a bed.
You were commenting on it on the first night, how much of a difference it was making. I honestly think that was a little bit of a game changer, the bed.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've got my mum to thank for that one.
Yeah. Do you take off your shoes when you go to bed, or do you leave them on?
Generally, no. Especially in the third night, we just felt that it was far more efficient if I just left absolutely everything on. So I left my shoes on. I even left my bib. I have a habit of losing my bib.
Oh.
I left it back at the camp at least twice during the race. So to keep things organized and efficient, I just kept absolutely everything on, and I just lie back, put the blanket or the sleeping bag on top of me, and close my eyes as soon as I was lying down. And that definitely has evolved from the last couple of races to what I used to sort of do, which was just flounder around in my deck chair until the 3-minute bell rang.
Do you use a face mask and noise cancelling earphones?
No, I don't. It was pretty quiet. By the time there's only a handful of runners in the field, everything's sort of, scaled down by this time, and it's pretty quiet. I do put a beanie on to one, keep me warm, and two, I pull the beanie down to cover my eyes. So definitely I've got black, it's dark. But I don't put anything in my ears, purely just because I haven't needed to yet.
Yeah, sure. When it was down to just you and Joel, when it looked like there was nothing but respect between the two of you and no mind games or anything like that?
No, definitely not. I've got, Joel and I have too much respect for each other. We sort of, I know how good that guy is at running. On another day, the result could have been the other way around. I've got no doubt on that. It just went my way this time. For the first half of the race, he probably looked much stronger than me. And then the second half of the race, I probably looked a little bit stronger than him. It was as simple as that. And I'd take off a little bit faster at the start of each loop, purely because that first 1.5 kilometers is very cold because you're running against the wind coming off that lake. So I used the first 1.5 kilometers to warm up. and to sort of break the courses back. You get 2K into a course quickly, you're going to make it back in time. And so I always had a little bit of a gap on Joel early in the loop, but then he gradually just peg it back to make sure he came back in time to get a little bit of rest as well. But definitely no mind games. Like Joel and I get on very, very well, and we continue to do so. We just had different pacing strategies, so we didn't get to spend a whole lot of time together, which is unfortunate. He's a much faster walker than I am, so I could never ever keep up with him during the walking segments. So yeah, our pacing strategies were worlds apart, and it just proves that there are multiple ways to get through a course. So anyone listening to this, you might not be the fastest runner in the world, you might be a better power hiker. There are many ways to complete a backyard course, and you have to, my suggestion to anyone is to get the best out of yourself. You sort of have to run your race. You have to do the pacing strategy that best suits your sort of skills and levels of expertise. I'm a decent runner, so when I'm running, I'm moving pretty quickly. But when I'm walking, man, am I sluggish. Everyone's overtaking me because when I'm walking, I'm resting. I'm not hiking, I am dawdling. And that's why when I run, I have to run sort of on top of the ground to cover the distance. So, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about how the race finished. Now, I understand that you didn't know it was finished until you got out of bed or something like that.
Yeah, it was such a surprise to me. I was dreaming like a baby at the time. That third night was generally probably the first night ever where I was starting to get actual quality sleep, which is obviously such a confidence boost going forward. But I come in after my lap, did exactly like we'd done for the 30 laps beforehand. I was asleep. And then with 4 minutes to go, my alarm goes off, and Pete and Robbie House just bust into the tent and say, Dubes, you got to wake up. You got to wake up. And I'm still dead to the world. I'm like, what are you talking about? What's up? And I sort of sat up to eat my noodles or whatever. And then they were like, oh, don't worry about that. You've won. And then they obviously went on to tell me that what happened to Joel. And I was still obviously coming to terms with it and didn't quite understand it because I swore I could see Joel's headlamp not too far away from me. Maybe I was seeing something else. But I was very, very surprised that it ended when it did because I just assumed at this point it was midnight. I just assumed that Joel and I sort of were resigned to the fact we were going to run through the entire night. It was a surprise to me, but, to be honest, a very pleasant surprise because you never, when you get told that the race is over and you've won, you never, you're always happy that the race is over.
Yeah, especially after 60 hours too, I'll bet.
Yeah, because I was dead to the world, so it might be worth asking Pete the same question because he probably lived it. Probably. So what's your version of events, Pete?
I don't know if there's ever been a time, a weekend in my life where I spent as much time looking at a clock as I did on this weekend. And it felt, obviously, heading out, it felt like just heading out for, at 60, it felt like any other yard. There was no sign that anything had changed for Joel. And I actually texted your wife, Sarah, on the hour after you'd left. And I've got the message here. I said, I'm pretty sure there's a fair few hours to go. I don't see this ending very soon. He's actually getting some sleep, and he's also getting plenty of hot food down. That was at 11 o'clock. And at that point, we were locked in till you'd given me the instruction of, we're not changing anything until 6 a.m. No clothes changes or anything. We're just going to do this until 6 a.m. So back to watching the clock, you came in on I think it was 47, 48. I mean, you seem to be getting a bit faster even with the confidence. You came in at the 47 and 48. And I was watching the clock as I do, and I was watching the official clock and I couldn't see Joel. And usually we'd see him because you could see like a kilometer away across the lake. I didn't see his light, and I didn't see his light. And I got to like 53 minutes, and there was no sign. And I thought, well, if he's getting in now, he's gonna have like a 1 minute turnaround. And then it dawned on us at about 3 or 4 minutes to that the race was over. There was probably only me and Robbie. Yeah, I don't think Joel's partner was there. I think she was in the tent, so it's probably just me and Robbie. And then we realized that it wasn't coming in and that you'd won. And I wanted to go and tell you that, but obviously we needed to make sure that we knew where Joel was and that he was okay. And I think Robbie really wanted to be the one to tell you that you'd won. And then Joel's partner came out and she said she'd heard from him and that he was out on the course. Then I wanted to come and tell you then as well, but Robbie said, well, we got to go and get Joel. And I said, well, I've got to wake up Matt, because if his alarm goes off and it's past the hour, he's going to freak out. He's going to think that we've kind of stuffed the race. So we agreed to just walk over together and let you know that you'd won. I was so excited. I'd actually gone out about 3 or 4 hours before and bought a bottle of champagne. So at that point, I'd become personally quite confident that we had this. And so in my head, I was going to rush over and get champagne, and we were going to do that with Joel at the end. It was a very exciting finish.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it. So physically, how did you feel at the end of GV compared to Melbourne, Matt?
Probably similar, to be honest. Like at Melbourne, like even though I got the assist, it sort of felt like a victory for me, because I'd achieved everything I went into the race hoping to achieve. I didn't go into Melbourne to win. I really just wanted to run a big total with Ben and whoever else wanted to come along for the ride. So, you know, at the end of Melbourne, although I was very tired because it was at that point, it was the longest I'd ran, you know, by a fair stretch. I still had a little bit left in me to be mindful enough to be satisfied. And same with GV. You know, GV, obviously the goal was to win. So yeah, achieving that goal was very special. I guess, yeah, there was a lot of similarities, to be honest. But obviously with GV, you get presented with a big medal and the silver coin. That was obviously the high point of, you know, that's the difference between winning and being the assist. Very, very special moment, to be honest. And after the race, Pete and I shared a beer and a glass of champagne in the hotel room. Yeah. And it was, very, very special.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you're the perfect duo. I mean, Matt, we make running backyards look easy. And Pete, you make crewing look easy. So,
Matt is pretty easy to crew for, because he finishes in less than 50 minutes. You've got time to execute the plan. So I crewed for Ben Hurst last year, and my crewing for Ben Hurst, and he won a silver ticket as well. So I've got 4. I've got 2 silver ticket winners.
Yeah.
In my crewing stable. He's a slower runner, and he comes in at 54, 55 minutes, and the crewing is a whole lot tougher when you've got to get stuff done and you've only got 4 or 5 minutes, especially if you've got to go to the bathroom and want some hot food, and it's a fair bit harder work. But with Matt, the pattern just kind of nailed itself. It's just change the bottle, have the food prepared already in advance. I've got an hour to do that. And then I was trying to get him as much sleep as possible. So it's like, I'll see you in 7 minutes, and I'd leave him in the tent, come back with 7 minutes later with the sort of 3.5 to go. And then we just follow the script.
Yeah.
Have the food, get out to the start line again, take off at the start, repeat. It's actually quite easy. And I felt a whole lot better, like with my own sleep and everything. I felt a whole lot better on night 3 than I did in Melbourne for some reason. I think I was getting better sleep as well. I didn't have the camp bed, but I actually was, for some of the time, I was going back to the hotel room, because I had a hotel room right opposite, just setting my timer for 25 minutes, shutting my eyes, and then coming back with plenty of time, like 25 to kind of thing. I didn't want to take any chances. I'm paranoid about sleeping through and then just disappearing.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. But I was managing my own sleep such that I think I had a night 4 in me as well.
Yeah, awesome. And Pete, do you like having like a loop by loop plan written out, or do you guys kind of just do it like naturally?
There is one written out, but to me, it's a bit more of a fallback. So I insisted the first time I crewed Matt that he had one. For the GB last year, he wrote one to 60 hours because I said, I don't want to be making this stuff up. I don't want us to be in a situation where you're not lucid and you want something and it's not working. So I insisted on a plan being written out. But it turns out that his pattern, although it varies per lap, is very predictable. We had like each night lap, there would be the hot food, the Coke, slightly warmed up Coke, and he would defer to me in terms of what the hot food would be, just the rotation of the noodles, the rice, sometimes something from the fast food place. That was kind of predictable as anything. In the morning, we would try and transition more to breakfast food, and we had some sort of wheat bix type of deal with milk, and that was working for 3 or 4 hours every morning. And because he's so good at getting it down and when we weren't having issues, I guess probably if we were having issues and not having a hard time getting to the start line in time, the dynamic might have been a bit harder and a bit different. But because it went so smoothly, it was actually very easy, in my view.
Mm. So Pete, you know your way around a backyard ultra. I mean, you're running them, you've organised them, and you've crewed in them. You've witnessed the very cream of the crop since day one. So for people who don't know, you actually organised or were part of organising the first ever backyard ultra in Australia. So what do you think it is about Matt that makes him so good at backyards?
Well, I feel like Matt has probably evolved with the way that the style of racing in Australia has evolved. The first one we did, it was there wasn't a concept of having a crew, barely a concept of having an aid station, communal aid station for everybody, and it was just tough it out. And getting through a night of running was tough, and the real key to success then was getting through a second night. And Matt was good at that. He was good at the 36 hour, good at getting to the 36-hour mark because he could tough it out. But then it evolved, and I feel like the Phil Gores of the world probably kind of led the way on this into a sleep strategy, something to replenish yourself, being a bit more systematic about it. And Matt's evolved with that. He's been forced to evolve with that in order to stay on top of the game. As he said, he sort of almost ended out in the wilderness for a little while there. But then I remember Matt contacts. I talked to Matt quite a bit during the last Sat Champs, and I remember one particular message, which I think is kind of in my head led to all of this, was that he had quite serious FOMO, so having not made the team last time, and it had become like almost a life goal to make the team again. And that commitment, which led to needing to strategize more. And I feel like the 100-mile weeks and the training is a kind of a baseline that you need to do, but that's not what's going to win you the races. It's the strategy and the mindset and hopefully being a crew can be part of helping that side of it. We'll see what happens at the Sat Champs next year.
Yeah. So is there one aspect of the format, Pete, where you think Matt has
he had the X factor in this race of having the speed and having the most things under control. I felt like to separate Matt from quite hard to separate Matt from like the Phil and the Tim K, because they've got probably quite similar strategies. Matt may be more versatile. We don't need to follow that plan. And I know Phil says he can vary his plan, but the plan really is, it's not a strict plan. It's more of a kind of a guide for what we think needs to happen and a guide for what's needed. And Matt's quite happy to put that guide aside for 6 hours and say, right, I don't want to change my shoes now. I'll do it in 3 hours time. Or what happened on night 3 was he said, I'm not going to change my clothes or change anything now until 6 in the morning. He felt like the race was going to start to play out from 6 in the morning on, is it Tuesday or Wednesday? Tuesday. from 6 in the morning on Tuesday. So then we were just locked into a very simple routine. We're not trying to hit a specific pace, not forcing ourselves to have a specific nutritional element, not worrying if the timing wasn't exactly 12 minutes of sleep, just kind of going with the flow and what the race brought him. So probably that resilience or that ability to handle different scenarios might be what the superpower is. I think that for next round, the one thing I would think would help, because I'm all about the banking the sleep, is maybe a bit faster at night. I was telling him, if you can get a little bit faster at night, you get a bit more sleep. He just didn't quite have the legs to get faster, and it was working, so it didn't force it, didn't change anything.
Yeah. And how have you pulled up from the race, Matt? Have you started running again yet, or
Oh, no. I generally, regardless of how I feel, I generally give myself like a week or two off, just to come down and fully recover. Like I guess I could go for a little jog right now if I really wanted to. I wouldn't particularly enjoy it. I've still got very heavy legs and my calves are still very stiff. But look, I'm completely injury free, which is the most important thing. So look, I'll do. I've got all the time in the world now. So I'll give it at least 2 weeks of just complete rest, complete recovery, and then I'll start running again. But the body feels, compared to what it's been through, and compared to previous races, my body feels really good.
Yeah. Awesome. So you're locked in for the Sat Champs, which is over 12 months away. I mean, it must be a nice feeling knowing that you're locked in. And have you thought about how you're going to plan your training leading up to that race?
Look, it's still very early. Look, I'm not 100% sure, and you're right. It is a long time away. So I've just got to be careful not to be too enthusiastic and to risk, overtraining, and risk, being overcooked come Sat Champs. So I'm still going to keep, my 3 or 4 months proper build up that I've done for the last 2 events. So leading up to the Sat Champs, I probably won't change much at all. I'll just month on month build my mileage. But between now and that point where I start the proper block, that's sort of what's up in the air. And, I might, now that I get to sort of watch the events, knowing that I'm under no pressure to enter them, like I might attend a few events, and just maybe run 100 miles in them, and sort of go back to enjoying events rather than competing in them. Hopefully I can get to a couple of backyards in the next year and just have fun with them, and really, really explore, the social side of backyards that sometimes I sort of miss out on because I'm so sort of serious and structured in my loops when I'm racing for a win. So I really hope to, have a bit more fun this next year over the next couple of events. And, I might do some volunteering as well. And as Pete sort of said, maybe I need to work on a bit of speed work. Maybe I need to get even a little bit faster if I want to compete at the very top end with Australia's very best. Maybe I do need to get a little bit faster. And so maybe I just need to start heading back to the park run and smash out those 5Ks and get that 5K time down. Because I've got the time. So if I wanted to work on speed work or strength work, I've got the time. So why not do that?
Yeah, sure. And because you've got the time, have you thought about doing, a different kind of race? Like, I don't know, maybe a trail ultra or anything like that?
Look, I haven't thought about it yet, but it's definitely something that I'll think about, because I always say that, sort of being devoted to the backyard format, it sort of leaves me without enough time to explore other methods, other ultra running sort of formats. I'd love to do point to point and, mountain ultras as well. I I just sort of haven't had the time to put it in my calendar. So maybe this is the perfect opportunity.
Mm. We did talk a little bit about the individual world championships before. So is making it there front and center on your vision vision board?
No, it's not front and center. Look, it might be come Sat Champs time, because that's the opportunity to do it. You're going to be running with the very best runners, some of the very best runners in the entire world. The opportunity to run a massive, massive number will be there. There's no doubt about that. So I know Pete, who is a close confidant of Laz, being obviously playing a huge part in bringing the format to this country. But he would love to go back to America, or he would love to go to wherever the next individual champs are. He would love to go back and spend time with Laz. Laz isn't getting any younger. So if part of the deal of Pete crewing me is for me to return the favour and try and qualify for an individual champs, so that we can sort of realise one of Pete's dreams, that's something that we'll definitely look at. But having said that, it's a Sat Champs, so first and foremost, it's a team event. And what I fell in love with the format again at the previous Sat Champs was just how special the community was, and the team format that until then I wasn't the hugest fan of, because my experience in 2022 at the Sat Champs was nothing like the experience of the 2024 Sat Champs. The format's just evolved, the community's just evolved so much that it's so different now. And I really want to experience that. And I just know the people that were there at the Sat Champs of 2024, all of them say, that it was one of the best experiences in their running lives. And the driver for me is to be part of a team. And I genuinely think that Australia has the pedigree to win the world champs. We had a couple of softer performances that really killed us in 2024. I think those days are gone. So I think Australia are right in the box seat to win the whole thing. Maybe part of that would be, the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, it would be. And Pete, are your running days still in front of you? You're going to start running a bit more?
My running, I probably run for about 6 months of the year and then get lazy for the other 6 and then start again. I'm in the process of I've actually, since scouting out the Melbourne front yard course with Matt earlier this year, that's another thing we sort of did leading up to Melbourne. We somewhat designed the course a bit together. I've got a little Facebook group that includes Eric and Joe and a couple of others who and it's actually called Melbourne Front Yard Ultra Group. And we've been every Thursday going and doing a yard on the Melbourne Front Yard course, because that's my local trails, our local trails. When I say every Thursday, it's sort of it was every Thursday until about June, and that's tailed off pretty badly. But the group is still there, and there's still a message every week of who's up for it. And pretty much me and Joe are the rock solid ones. We're the ones who do most of them. But running every week at least once, and I'd like to. There's part of me that was going to say to Matt, I want you to crew me at Melbourne next year and see if I can get 24.
Yeah, awesome.
But I'm not that committed.
No, that would be fun.
Yeah. That would be a big achievement for me to go and do 100 mile an hour. So that would be cool. But I don't know if mentally I've got what it takes to do the training to do that, to be honest.
No, fair enough. So I guess, Matt, you were on the podcast not all that long ago, so I did get your backyard ultra tips then. I've never got your 3 backyard ultra tips, Pete.
Oh, putting me on the spot. I think that planning for the long haul by way of resting is probably the number one tip. I'm going to be a bit biased now because now I've become a professional crewer. But if you're going to go more than 24 hours, I reckon you need a crew.
Yeah.
That'd probably be number two. And then the number three, just from my ultra running days, would probably be never try and run too fast. Always be conserving, always be holding back a little bit. I think that you're better off running a very easy 55-minute yard than a really, really tough 15-minute yard. If it's gonna, I think you'll blow out. If you're finding the yards too hard. So I think that pacing is everything. Although obviously if you're running 55s, it's going to be hard to get to 30 hours or 36 hours. But yeah, I think pacing is really important. Running within yourself.
Mm. And Matt, do you have any new tips that you can add?
Get a professional crewman and get a bed.
Yeah. Awesome.
I've never experienced the value of sleep until sort of now. When I was actually getting sleep on that third night, Pete would wake me up with 3.5 minutes to go. And even though I'd probably only been lying down for 5 minutes, I felt like a new man every single loop. And that's kept me so confident in that third night. So trying to get some sleep if you're going long. For under 24 hours or 36 hours, it's not the most important thing in the world. Have fun. Don't get too much sleep. But if you at the top end of the format, I've just found out sleep is incredibly important. It held me back for a very long time. And I'm only now starting to sort of be successful with sleeping. And maybe the bed is all I needed.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I mean, congratulations to both of you. Like, it was you put on a masterclass. It was bloody impressive to see, and I'm so happy for you as well because I know how much you love the format, and like you mentioned before, like there was a long period where you ran your 40 at MVP, and other people from that race, like, were running Ross McLean doing 50s and Tim doing 80s and all that kind of thing, and Ben going to bigs too. So, and now you're right up at the top.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Obviously, I can never undervalue my sort of devotion to the format. That's kept me in good stead. When I've faltered at times and sometimes I haven't had the best performances, like yourself, Pato, the factor that never goes away is your devotion to the format. And that's what keeps bringing me to the start line. And something tells me in my heart of hearts, that's what keeps bringing you to the start line as well, Pato, is just your genuine love for the format and what it's given you.
Yeah.
That's first and foremost the important thing for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, congratulations again. Anything you want to add, Pete?
No, I guess I'd reiterate how much fun the format is. I always thought, but when I was talking about backyard ultras 6-7 years ago, the best thing about an ultra, about any ultra, at least as a spectator and as someone who's participating in it, is the start line and the finish line. Those are where the most fun is had, really.
Yeah.
And with a backyard, you get one of them every hour. You get a start line every hour, you get a finish line every hour, and all the fun that goes with it.
Yeah.
And there's drama. So if there's 100 runners, there's 100 dramas unfolding, and you get to see all of them. Like with any other ultra, most of the runners take off and then you don't see any of them again, really. Maybe you'll see the finish line if you're there at the right time. But with this one, you get to witness the entire race with everybody, for everybody, doing it together. Great format.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the best. It is the best. Well, look, congratulations again. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do at Sat Champs. I think you're going to absolutely smash it. And yeah, look, and we'll keep in touch, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks a lot, Pato.
Thanks, Pato. All the best. See you, Matt. Take care, mate.
See you, bud.